Hi, everybody. So, today we're looking at our final theme. It's going to be fate, free will, and the supernatural in Macbeth. So, I'm going to read through our notes first so that you can work out what you need to highlight, and I'll add little bits and pieces in if you want to annotate. So, as I highlight, you need to highlight the same thing. All right. In Shakespeare's Macbeth, the themes of fate, free will, and the supernatural intertwine to create a complex narrative that explores the consequences of ambition. These elements contribute to the tragedy of Macbeth and his eventual downfall. The witch's prophecies set the stage for Macbeth's rise and fall, while his subsequent choices illustrate the power and peril of free will. So, this is the link between the supernatural free will and fate. The witch's supernatural, whoops, the witch's supernatural prophecy is the thing that allows Macbeth to make the choice between whether he goes with his fate to become king, as they say will happen, or whether he pushes it forward and his free will to kill the king allows that fate to happen to occur earlier. Alright, ultimately, Shakespeare suggests that while fate may lay the groundwork, it is human agency that determines the course of one's life, often leading to tragic consequences when ambition overrides moral integrity. So we're going to highlight that whole thing. Alright, fate plays a crucial role in Macbeth, primarily through the prophecies of the Weird Sisters. From the outset, the witches introduce a sense of predestination or determinism by foretelling Macbeth's rise to power and Banquo's lineage. However, they don't tell him the whole story at the outset. So they tell him that it's his fate to become king and they plant this seed, but they don't actually tell him how it's going to happen. The way it happens, the killing of the king, that's his free will. And that's his selfishness and his ambition rising up over the fate that may have come to him eventually anyway. All right, so however, okay, blah, blah, blah. Hence, so I'm up to here. Hence, their predictions spark Macbeth's ambition, suggesting that fate is actually a predetermined path that he is bound to follow. The idea that Macbeth is fated to become king implies a cosmic order. Yet, the unfolding events suggest that individual choices can alter the course of fate. So that's what I was saying before, is that the cosmic order or fate is that he will become king. It's just they didn't tell him how. That, or the way that he killed the king, that was all free will, driven by his wife and his own ambition. As such, Macbeth's ambition is important to consider when it comes to fate, because he is willing to put himself above king and country, and as such he seals his own fate when he commits regicide. And by fate there it means his final downfall, the fact that he dies in tragedy at the end. The play raises questions about the nature of fate itself. Is it an unavoidable destiny, or does it merely set the stage for human action? We can begin to answer these questions when we consider how fate contrasts against the concept of free will. While the witch's prophecies ignite Macbeth's ambition, it is ultimately his choices that lead to his moral decline. I'm going to highlight that. Macbeth grapples with his conscience, and despite the warnings of the supernatural, he chooses to murder King Duncan to fulfill his ambition. So, at the beginning, he hears all these shrieks, and just as he's about to kill the king, he hears voices and he hears things that warn him and that scare him and that are fearful or make him fearful, but he doesn't stop. He still kills the king. This act of free will initiates violence and tyranny, displaying how personal decisions can lead to one's own destruction. Lady Macbeth also embodies this struggle through her manipulation of Macbeth, driving him further down the path of immorality. Their descent illustrates that free will can lead to catastrophic events or consequences, highlighting the tension between fate and individual agency or free will, the ability to do what you think is right for you. Now, one thing I want you to add here if you haven't already, the idea of free will and committing regicide breaks the chain of being, and that is the biggest sin that you could possibly commit. And it's done through the witch's prophecies, which are supernatural, and seen as evil. So that's the bit we're going to read next, but I want you to put a note in here if you can about the chain of being, because context is something that you're going to have to look at when you do Macbeth. Acting as the catalyst for this battle between fate and free will are all the supernatural elements in Macbeth, particularly the witches and their prophecies. The witches represent a chaotic, otherworldly force that influences human actions, blurring the lines between destiny and autonomy. Or autonomy means like the ability to do your own thing, to have free will. Their cryptic language and manipulation creates an atmosphere of foreboding, suggesting that human beings are mere pawns in a larger cosmic game. Additionally, the supernatural occurrences, like the visions and hallucinations of the dagger Macbeth sees before killing Duncan, and the topsy-turvy condition of nature itself, symbolizes the psychological turmoil experienced by the characters when the consequences of their actions and free will are realized because they listened to the supernatural forces of the witches. Okay, so there's our notes. Now I'm going to go down here. And like I did before, I'm going to talk about what happens here. I'm going to tell you techniques and I'm going to tell you what the analysis is. So in this box and this box, you're adding your own ideas as you listen to me. So you can pause it as you need to write down stuff that you think is important. Okay, so let's have a look at our first quote here from page 8. It says, "If chance will have me king, why chance may crown me without my stir." Now, this is Macbeth being hopeful. At this point, he's already heard the witch's prophecy, and he says to himself, I really hope that fate makes me king without me having to do anything about it. But it shows that his ambition is starting to fester, and he's starting to think, well, what might I have to do in order to become king? So here, if chance will have me king, and by chance, it means fate, right? So if fate or fortune will have me be king, why, chance may crown me without my stir. So chance here, or fate and fortune, is being personified and saying that it's going to crown him. And his hope is that fate will just allow him to be king eventually. And we know that doesn't happen because as soon as he tells his wife about this, her ambition kicks in and she decides that she wants to push him towards killing the king. And that's when free will comes into play, right? So his free will is that he's not going to sit there and wait for chance. He's actually going to commit regicide in order to become the king. Okay, so here we've got chance being repeated and we have personification. Okay, and his hopeful tone that he may not have to do anything to become king. So pause it there if you want to. I'm going to move down here. So page 20, line 42. This is Macbeth. And this is just after he's murdered the king. So regicide has just happened and he's having panic attack basically, or a stroke of remorse. He's feeling bad about what he's done and he's telling Lady Macbeth that he can't cope. So he's saying, I've heard a voice. At this point, he's just killed the king and he hears a voice screaming at him or yelling at him. And he says, still it cried, sleep no more to all the house. Glamis hath murdered sleep. Macbeth shall sleep no more. Now, we've already talked about the word sleep. We talked about it a couple of times, actually. Sleep, if you notice, comes up 3 times, which means our technique is repetition. And the other technique is double meaning. So sleep, the repetition of sleep has a double meaning. The first is that Macbeth is now not going to get any peace. His guilty conscience is not going to let him sleep well. He'll have nightmares for the rest of his life as a consequence of what he's just done. Because committing regicide, again, remember, is the biggest sin because it breaks the chain of being. The other thing it does, it talks about death, sleep, right? So the other earlier on he talks about sleep and sleep and sleep, and it's because he's just committed a sin, which means that Duncan himself will sleep forever. So earlier on, if you want to go back to that quote, he talks about creating sleep or being the one to cause Duncan to have final sleep. And here, notice how we've got punctuation marks here. Sleep no more. So we have all this punctuation that's broken and showing that Macbeth is having a real issue with what he's done. So the exclamation mark shows that he really is freaking out about what's happening. He's having a little bit of a breakdown over what he's done. If we're talking about fate and free will, we're talking about now his free will having kicked in and he's going to have to suffer the consequences. The consequences are that he's not going to be able to live a peaceful life from this point on. So that's how it links in with fate and free will. All right, moving down to page 27, lines 5 to 7. Now, in this act, in this scene, Ross is talking to an old man. And he's talking about King Duncan has just died, and they've all realized that King Duncan is dead. And the old man says, I've never seen anything as horrible as this. And Ross says, Thou seest the heavens, as troubled with man's act, threatens his bloody stage. By the clock 'tis day, and yet dark night strangles the travelling lamp. He's saying, so by saying thou seest the heavens, he says, you see the heavens? Look at them. As troubled with man's act, threatens his bloody stage. So heavens here is personified. Heaven is threatening the men down on the ground. Heaven is darkening. He's looking up at the skies and he's saying, God, look at all this horrible stuff. Look at the clouds. Look at how dark it's getting. So we've got pathetic fallacy being used. The sky, remember, pathetic fallacy is when the weather is used to show or to reflect an emotion or what's happening in the play. So the sky is darkening. The heavens are getting cloudy. And it's showing that man is troubled. Now, this personification shows that because of that darkening, because the heavens are going dark, man's bloody stage is being threatened. Now, bloody stage is a metaphor for earth, but it's also really clever because Shakespeare is referencing the stage itself. So there's a technique here called meta theatre. So if something is meta-theatrical or meta-theatre is being used, the composer is talking about two things. They're talking about the theatre itself and they're talking about the world. So that's what Shakespeare's, especially in Shakespearean drama, that's what Shakespeare's doing at this point. He's saying to the audience, look at this bloody stage, everything's about to start and it's getting dark and he's just committed regicide and the consequences, you're about to see the consequences. So he's doing that through the character of Ross. Ross himself, as a character, is saying, God, look at this bloody stage, as in, look at the earth. Our land, Scotland itself, is darkening and something bad is coming. So there's a lot of technical stuff going on here. I'm going to say it one more time. So through pathetic fallacy and the darkening of the heavens, and through personification that the heavens are threatening human beings and earth at this point, we see that there's a meta-theatrical element when Ross says the bloody stage is set. So look at this bloody stage, it's going to get violent and it's going to get awful from this point. All right, now let's have a little look at the rest of it. By the clock 'tis day. So the clock tells me, my watch tells me that it's daytime, but it's so dark that it looks like night. And here we've got personification again. The dark night strangles the travelling lamp. So any light, any sense of goodness has now been strangled by the dark because Macbeth has just committed regicide, although they don't know that yet. So I want you to spend some time going back over what I've said about that one. I'll talk to you about it in class when I come back because it's actually a pretty tricky one. There's a lot of stuff happening there. If you think the meta theatre stuff is a bit too tricky for you, leave it out, but you can talk about pathetic fallacy and you can talk about personification and what the effect of those is. All right, we're going to look at our last one. So page 64, line 24 to 30. My way of life has fallen into the sea. Now, this comes at towards the end when Macbeth is starting to realize that everything is falling apart. He's lost his wife. He's about to go into battle. My way of life has fallen into the sear, the yellow leaf, and that which should accompany old age, as honour, love, obedience, troops of friends, I must not look to have, but in their stead curses, not loud but deep, mouth honour. Okay, so this is where he's lamenting his consequences, the consequences of his actions. He's saying, I realise now what I did and what the consequences of killing the king are. So my way of life has fallen into the sear. Now remember, sear in Shakespearean is another word for autumn. So it's a metaphor. The metaphor is that his life is now falling apart. He's about to enter the winter of his life, which sort of represents through metaphor death, right? He's going to die. So it's foreshadowing his death. The yellow leaf and that which should accompany old age. So now he says, he gives us a list of things that he should have in old age. So listing is your technique, and he's listing the things that he would love to have. He would love to have honour, obedience, and troops of friends. However, he doesn't have those things. Juxtaposition is used now. So remember, juxtaposition means the opposite. And he says that in their stead, so instead of having honor, love, obedience, and troops and friends, I have got curses, not loud but deep, and mouth honor. Curses can mean two things. People who are cursing him and saying that he's a horrible guy and they're speaking ill of him. But it also refers back to the witches and the curse that basically they've put him on him, the supernatural sort of element of it. And then he says mouth honor. So basically, people are honoring me by saying nice things to me, but I know they're all fake. I have no real friends. So Macbeth is now recognizing the effects of what his initial actions were. And that links in to the idea of his free will being the thing that eventually, and his ambition being the thing that eventually causes his downfall. All right. Bye.